We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
with global pals. It's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita
And Ellen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Everything Theater podcast, the podcast where we talk about
Everything theater. We make it really simple for you. Hi, everybody. I'm Benita Zahn.
And I'm Ellen Cribbs. Great to have you all with us today.
Yeah, this has just been bam, bam. There's so much theater happening in the capital region and beyond. It's like extended family and such riches and our opportunity to be able to talk about it. We've got the folks from the Great Barrington Public Theater with us today. So how lucky are we? And they've got an incredible lineup going for the season. So we're going to jump right in. We've got Robert Egan with us, and he's a producer and director. Good to have you with us, Robert.
Thank you.
James Morrison is with us also. And I've got all my stuff here. And Mike, you're with us a short period of time. You're sort of the
Mike Clary.
Yeah, Mike Clary, and I'll call you the chief cook and bottle washer of the public information for the.
Well, you can call me the bottle washer. I'm not the chief cook, but I am the bottle washer. I do the communications. I work with Jim. I work with Deanne. Work with Tristan. Sort of help build the theater company, get things together off season, on season, wherever I can fit in. I do some tasks.
You do okay. Give us I know you got to run, so give us the 411 on the history of Great GBPT. And
well, it started by Jim Frangione and Deanne Simmons-Halper, and long history in theater, both of them. Jim lives in Great Barrington. He, for many years, was active in theater there. He had something called Berkshire Playwrights, developed a lot of new plays. He has a very extensive background on stage. And he saw sort of a need and an ability to be able to gather some of the local talent, because the Berkshires is very rich in theatrical talent. Many of the people who are on Broadway in Boston and Los Angeles either reside in the Berkshires full-time or part-time. And Jim just saw an opportunity to be able to build a theater company where he could use that talent and also employ people who are here full-time, build a theater company, new work, new voices, things you might not see. And he has the wherewithal, the ability to recruit it and get it together, and started it in 2019. And 2020, of course, was COVID, so we did things online. Last year, we did a couple of premieres. We did a David Mamet premiere. And, we're building and we're doing very well. This year, it was decided to do the Solo Fest, and this is what Leave Your Fears Here is part of. And the idea is to present the stories of humanity with a single voice, a single performer, just to show how strong the human voice can be.
And that brings us to Robert and James.
Yes.
So
Good segue.
what's the appeal of doing this? I mean, I think Mike set it up great. He threw a good pitch for you.
What's the appeal, Bob?
The appeal for this particular show?
Yeah.
Well, we've come out of a time of, I think, great awareness and vulnerability about health issues. I mean, there's three big pandemics going on. One is a viral pandemic, we have a racial pandemic, and we have an environmental pandemic. So I think humanity is faced with some pretty big challenges.
You're thinking, I'm just going to jump in, because the write-up on the play is that when catastrophic illness strikes suddenly, lives are rudderless. And that in many ways speaks to where we are now.
Right.
Right.
So I think, Jim's story is in the time, in this case, it's a health issue with a family member, his son. But it could apply to so many other big challenges that we face in our culture and country today. what is the kind of necessary mental, physical, and spiritual connection that will take us onward, forward. So we, as I say, this is a story about James's son, but it's a ritual about a big theme for me, which is oneness, how we create oneness between ourselves, and in this case, a son. But Jim expands it beyond, the ritual expands beyond his son to the community in the theater that night and beyond.
And go ahead, Ellen.
I was going to say, and James, you have such a vast, wonderful resume of playwriting and performing, but this is very special because it's your story, and it's you performing yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about how that differs from writing something else and performing something else?
Yeah, to speak to that, I think I'll just continue sort of off of what Bob was saying about what I discovered when I felt that I wanted to reveal what happened to our family. It occurred to me that, I mean, I'd been writing about it and I had some material already, but Bob helped me realize in a way that I probably hadn't looked at it, that it's not really the story of my son's journey through cancer as much as it's my story about my reaction to it and what he taught me about myself, and my connection to everyone around me when we went through it. I had an interesting discussion the other night when I met a fellow at the opening of The Shot, which just closed at the theater, and I was, he said, so this is your piece, you're in it, and he said, and I said, yeah, and he said, you wrote it, and I said, yeah. He said, so it's pretty much you, it's pretty much all you. And I said, yeah, but I'm not the star of the show. And I think that's what actually ends up happening, is that there's this voice that I have found to be my sort of guiding light in how I connect with other people, and the need, off of what Bob was saying, for us to connect to each other. And that's my boy's lesson that he imparts to me in the process of the play. So that was what was most important. The other thing is that we were looking for a thing like this when we were going through it, and there wasn't anything like it. So I decided that if one person in the audience can benefit from this in terms of, hope, then my job here is done.
This wraps up. This is the fourth in a 4-play series for Solo Fest. When you read it, Mike, and were you part of the deciders, or, and how did it come that this was selected to be part of this grouping of shows?
Well, I can't speak for Jim, but I do know that when I read it, I mean, it touched something in me, in that, this is a dilemma that we all face some way or another, the closeness with family or a friend. And how do we face that challenge, the dilemma? And without knowing James, I read this and the voice came very clear, and it was always sort of, well, I want other people to know this, that when you go through this catastrophe, which we all go through, you are not alone, and that here's a voice that can help you get to the other side. I mean, it just touched me there, because I know families and my own family, and instead of sort of floundering, this is an ability to sort of add a keel and let people know that this is a universal story, that you're not alone, it's happening. And James put it together very wonderfully, very beautifully, and very poetically, and just some things came out, the heroism of day-to-day living, of being able to face this and go through it as someone in the family and as someone who is under treatment for whatever the illness is. It takes a great amount of courage, and it's not often trumpeted, that sort of day-to-day courage. And that came through very clearly.
More to discuss about the show. I know we're going to lose you, Mike, Clary, shortly. I just want to ask, Broadway has said that they're going mask if you feel like it or not. And Equity has just jumped in and said, whoa, you know what? Nobody ever asked us. So there's a battle brewing there. What's the rule over at GPT?
We subscribe to something called the COVID Code of Courtesy. And we stay in line, first off, with what's going on with the state of Massachusetts. We also perform at Simon's Rock, and we have to subscribe to what Simon's Rock puts out for their own codes. We are asking people to mask. We are asking people to be distant, essentially practice public safety at all times. Be aware that this isn't over. And I mean, I don't know what's going on, particularly this season, in terms of how many people are masking, but we are asking people to mask. And the last I heard, we were masking because of equity rules. Equity, and I don't know, but I think it has to do with the size of the theater, size of the company. So when you attend, you are required to wear a mask.
And
Isn't that right, James and Robert? That's where we are this week?
I believe that Equity is beginning to transition its rules right now, but I don't know exactly what they're transitioning to.
I should know. I'm a card-carrying member, but as I said,
so is James, and I've been with
there's an issue right now that Equity is not happy that they weren't consulted with the Theater League. So we'll put that out there.
Yeah,
I'm wondering, Robert, as the director, so James brings you this incredibly personal story to tell, and you're trusted to put it on its feet with James. Share with us a little of the collaboration that went on. And if it's any different than if it had just been James got cast in something, somebody else wrote.
Well, it's entirely different than if James, I mean, pretty much. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably an 8 in terms of difference. Yeah, because James and I have known each other since the late 70s at Sundance Institute, where I was directing a play and Jim acted for me. And then I ran the Mark Taper Forum in Los Angeles for 20 years. And during that time, James and I had a lot of interactions working together. But yeah, this is because we've known each other for such a long time. James, I direct and dramaturg new work. So, and I could go into a whole big thing about what that means to be a dramaturg. So James is entrusting me with spatially how the play is going to live in a theater space. He's trusting me with his performance. But he's also entrusting me as a dramaturg with the development and deepening of his story, and how that story most effectively lives and articulates itself on a stage. So that, and I think if we hadn't known each other that as long as we have, and as well as we do, it might have been a rocky road. But we trust each other, and Jim trusts me with both my hats on. So he's got it. He's living it. He's watched it from the outside when he wrote it, and when he's in his memorization and visualizing. But once he gets in it, he's really got to trust me. And I've done a lot of one-person shows. I have a project that I call the American Mosaic Project, which probably has 10 projects in it. Jim's in the 10th. I love, one reason why I love them so much is you can get them on. They are eminently producible if they're excellent and rigorous and have something to say. Also, I'm just I love in The Empty Space of Peter Brook, how you can live it both in terms of your verbal action and your physical actions to bring the story alive. So Jim's had to, go through, Jim's a very experienced professional actor, but, we have a lot of catchphrases we use in the rehearsal process, like, this is a sensory experience. You've got to see it, taste it, smell it to make it come alive for me. Another one don't talk about it, be in it. Make it present tense. You can't be outside it, you have to be inside of it. So, and Jim understands that because he's been an actor for a long time. So, and it's a period of adjustment. Jim's having to perform something that is so personal and so overwhelmingly present in his entire being that he's in transition. But we're having a great time, and we had a great moment today in rehearsal. Jim has got to talk for an hour and 20 minutes, so
and with that, James, they say acting is reacting. So when it is just you on that stage, how do your acting techniques change? How do you approach the play differently?
They really don't. That's an interesting question. But I just want to just for a second go back to what Bob was saying about trust, because it's so important in this process. And I trust him implicitly. So that's a given. Any collaboration has moments where you go, gee, I don't know about that. Maybe let's talk about it more deeply. But I wouldn't be able to be myself at the same time I'm acting in this story about myself, which is kind of the most challenging thing I've ever done. So in answer to your question, I'm finding that I'm as Bob said, I'm reliving what the feelings that I went through when this was happening. I have to relive them. I can't just be outside them, commenting on them. And so that's not particularly difficult for me, but at the same time, what I do for a living is as Seamus's father, I'm an actor. So there are moments where I'm the actor talking about what happened to me as the dad in the story. It's many layered, and to discover those things is, I think, the most interesting part of this. And to be able to navigate those things. And again, it goes back to the trust that I have for Bob, his objectivity in this when I have none whatsoever. And so that's, I think, the most important thing about his guidance, and the most valued thing about it is when I'm able to just say, yeah, man, I'm in your hands, let's go. That's a great thing to say about any director in any project you're in, but especially one so personal. I really value his ability to see not just my story, but the humanity in it beyond that. And so that's a great gift to my process. So thanks, Bob.
Doing this, and it runs June 30 to July 10. And in the rehearsal process, reigniting the emotions that you lived firsthand without knowing where the landscape was going, what it would look like as you went along. And going back there on a recurring basis, share with us a little how, in a way, you have to protect yourself or buoy yourself or feed yourself because of the power of the emotions.
Hey, excuse me, I'm going to have to sign off. Thank you so much for everything. Thanks, James and Robert, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Mike.
Pleasure meeting everyone.
Thanks, Mike. We got you in there.
Good night.
Take care. Where were we?
About and protecting is the wrong word, but in
self-care.
Supporting self-care. Yeah. Supporting yourself because you've been through this and there were the emotions, the organic reaction, and now you revisit that. Yeah,
that's a great question too, because I'm not, I never really left this. I live it every day. There's a level of I don't know if I would call it PTSD, but it's similar to but listen, I've talked about this before, actually. As actors, this is not to minimize anyone who gets triggered by anything, but that's what we do. We purposely trigger ourselves based on whatever story we're living in, whatever the conditions and circumstances of any story that we're tasked with telling. We think about it and make it important to ourselves so that when it's called for, we can relive those moments and experience those emotions that we're called upon to experience. So in many ways, that's very similar to what I'm doing here. I'm just using my experience. I've already done the homework, is what I'm saying. It's all there. The hardest part is making it theatrical. I mean, this is the medium that we've chosen. So we, like Bob was saying, we have to fashion it, the storytelling part of it, for this medium. And I, having never done this before, had no idea how to do that. I sort of did when I wrote it, and with his help, I was able to design that more clearly. But
so then the corollary is, has this been a healing experience for you?
I think it has. It made me look at, and we should have stated this earlier, but in the play, I mean, it's a happy ending. My son survived. He's thriving. He's, just graduated from college. He's doing really well. Of course, he has some things that he's dealing with too, as his mother and I do. But, and I lost track of your question. Sorry.
If this was a healing,
Oh, healing. Yeah. I think it is healing. Yes. To be able to examine it in a different light than when you're actually living it. Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I know Bob has alluded to this. Your resume is probably 5 pages long, TV and stage. So I'm just going to encourage people, just look them up when we're done, so we can keep the conversation going here. But you're no newcomer, but this is a different experience. Oh,
completely. Yeah. I've always admired, people who can just get up there by themselves and tell a story. I often wondered how that was done, and I had a lot of trepidation about going into this. But again, it goes back to the trust and the relationship. Nobody else could have done this but Bob and I together. So I have to clear that up right away because of first of all, our history together, just having known each other so long. But also, he gets it. He gets the deeper level of it. And it's not just a story about a kid and a family who went through brain cancer. And that I'm most happy about that. But yeah, I'm stepping through a huge flaming hoop of fear to be able to do this. It feels really good. I mean, it's exhilarating.
I didn't know if you wanted to talk about the end, but because I was going to joke and say it's the second evening of Beckett. We just want to, it's depressing, but it's not. It's uplifting. And there was a book I had read.
Beckett is not depressing.
What's that?
Beckett is not depressing.
Oh, please.
I knew Samuel Beckett. I worked with him. He's not depressing at all. He's honest.
Oh, well, honesty can be difficult.
They all go on, don't they? They all go on.
Yes.
They all go on.
That's true.
I know what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying. There's just one of the local theaters did 3 1-acts of Beckett, and by the time you were done, you wanted to just go drink. You're so inclined.
But I would probably say, I wonder how they directed and produced them, because if you fall into the trap with Beckett of just living in the darkness of it and not the struggle to move on, which gives you hope. And actually, James's story is very similar, although different. Beckett's line is, "We give birth astride a grave." And when you think about the high moments of your life and the low moments of your life and how they live right next to each other, and James's story is so much about that. He's got a beautiful boy, a great son, baseball player, and boom, as Jim says in the play, it's like he got run over by a truck. Mm-hmm. But you can either cave in those moments, but the great beauty of humanity is we find a way to move on. And Jim's play is so much about that, of finding the strategies, finding the rituals, finding the connectivity. and in the end, learning from his son of how to move on, you know.
How to
But
view
Jim,
it.
it's interesting, Jim, you know, asking the question about the emotional life of it. It's, I wouldn't do this. I would have never entered this project if I thought James was not a person who was ready and willing and able to confront the deep well of emotion that is this experience. And that takes a certain kind of Olympian actor. And I've met, I fortunately, there are people like James out there, and I've met them, and it's a privilege to work with them. But Jim does not shy away from any of the deep emotion of this, and the terror and the fear and the fracturing of it all. He wants you to know that. He wants you to experience that, because it would be unfair to the people, both the children and adults who are experiencing these health challenges, and also the people around them. They know, Jim knows when it's true, and when people are just blowing smoke. He's not blowing any smoke on that stage.
When you told your son you were going to do this, what was his response?
Well, you know, I wrote about this at the time, and I wrote about it. I've written about it since, and he, you know, I don't know. I mean, I know that he's supportive. I know that he trusts me with his version of his experience, even though it's through my, you know, it's my perspective of it. My wife is an interesting question too, because she is kind of the opposite of me. She has no, she wants to see it in support of me as an actor. In fact, it was her idea for me to write a play about it, because it's what I do. So she thought that would be the best medium to use to tell this story. But she's not interested in reliving this in the same way, quite the same way I am, even though she's supportive of it. They're both, I think, and this is what we found too, interestingly, when we couldn't find, I said we couldn't find this story, we couldn't find people who had survived it for various reasons, legal reasons, ethical reasons. They don't freely give out numbers of people who have survived this, you know, but people want to move on, you know, when they've experienced this. And I think Riyadh and Seamus, they want to move on from it. And this is my way of moving on, you see.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Something when we first did it at the Ojai Playwrights Conference, we were really just focusing on how do we shape it, how do we build it, how do we imagine it in space, because Jim did a public reading. It was a public workshop. And it was only this time when I can more imaginatively engage and empathize with what Jim is going through. I'm totally aware and embracing now. This was 10 years of your life, right, Jim?
Yeah,
I know it's been your life once the diagnosis happened, but the intense part that we deal with is basically the age of 10 to what? We're
through high school. So
high school. So, you know, that's an 8-year period
8 years,
of time. Yeah. But I agree with what James just said. The need to go back and look at this and re-encounter the lessons learned, re-encounter the avenues that the experience and his son opened up, really delving into them as James does in pretty complex ways. I think James needs to remind himself of that to go through the next journey he's going to have with his son, which Seamus is going to be leaving at some point.
We're going to leave. That's what's happening here. We're looking at the clock and we're down at about 2 minutes. I just want to remind everybody that Leave Your Fears Here closes this 4-part solo fest, and it runs from June 30 to July 10th at the Leibowitz Black Box Theater at Bard College at Simon's Rock, and that's in Great Barrington. Buy your tickets, be in the moment, experience this unique and incredible work.
Yeah,
And
and
also, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, as
No,
James said, this play is full of poetry. I won't give away whose, how. It's lyrical. It's full of conflict. But it's a very powerful, joyful, life affirming journey to coming out the other side of, look, we've all been through COVID and for the last 3 years. So we all know probably everybody's been touched by it or someone that's had it, or health issues. As the boomers get older, suddenly we're seeing people die, and it's mortality is real, and this is a real touch with it and how to navigate those rocky shoals.
Gentlemen, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to encourage our listeners to go check out Great Barrington Public Theater's website. They have so much programming going on this summer. And Robert, sadly, I didn't get to ask you about the Ojai Playwrights Festival or conference, which you are the artistic director of, but our listeners need to go check that out too, because
we're announcing our season over the next couple of days, and we have
fantastic
12 new works we're developing and birthing.
Excellent. Great vehicle for diverse new work. So check that out, everybody. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. Our time always goes way too fast, but I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And I'm Benita Zahn. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, it's everything, everything.